Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, January 15th. If you're just tuning in, we just did our power rankings for the NFL Divisional round, ranked all 8 remaining teams 1 through 8. In this segment, we turn our attention to the coaching carousel, right? 6 openings. The Patriots obviously have already filled theirs, but the Cowboys came in and got that number right back up to 6. We're going to go through all 6 of them, predict which coaches will end up where, and talk a little bit about how we got there. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, January 15th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the 6 open spots for the 6 head coaches left here in the NFL. Coaching carousel continues to go around. This year feels like it's taken a little bit longer for a lot of coaching cycles to get filled. But as more teams start to get eliminated, we're going to start to figure it out. But this is prime time to get into some predictions. And we're going to start off with the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders have been a very interesting case all offseason, right? They fired both their GM and their head coach just a little bit later than most other teams, letting them have some press conferences and then a couple days after. Not the way that I would have handled it. A lot of it is because Tom Brady is getting involved in this process. And if you're going to defer to one person as an owner, Tom Brady, probably not the worst person in the world to defer to, right? He's a guy that when you want football knowledge, it's hard to get worse than the greatest football player in the history of the sport, right? But the Raiders have a tough decision to make. It's also not too pretty of a spot if you're looking to pick your spot like some of these guys are going to have the ability to do, like a Ben Johnson. That's one spot that when you look at the betting odds, he is the favorite to land with the Las Vegas Raiders. I just don't really see that happening. I know that a lot of buzz is happening. Ben Johnson is a guy that any team would be happy to have. He's turned down better opportunities. Like in Washington last season, he most likely would have gotten the job. He turns that down, decides to return to the Lions. He's got that ability to do it again. Do I think he's going to do it? No, I think he will find a job this coaching cycle, but I think there are better options out there than the Raiders. Now, if I had to list, go down a line here and go in order of which teams have the best spots to go to, the Raiders wouldn't be too far back. They've got a lot of cap space, but the only issue is they just don't have a quarterback. And as a first-time head coach, you don't want to hitch your wagon to a team that doesn't have a quarterback because that's going to make your job so much harder. So I think the Raiders are going to go and try and get a retread, someone trying to get back into coaching, maybe a guy like a Brian Flores, maybe a guy like a Pete Carroll. And I think that's the direction that they're going to go. And I think at the end of the day, Pete Carroll returns to the NFL, ends up coaching with the Raiders. We've heard his name a little bit in the headlines when talking about the Cowboys, when talking about the Jags, when talking about the Jets, some of these teams that have a retread written all over them. But the Raiders, I think, are a really good spot for Pete Carroll. He obviously isn't someone that is going to bet their entire career like some of these young guys are by picking a spot that's not that enticing to go to. Pete Carroll is a coach that's been able to find those talents in the later rounds at quarterback. He found Russell Wilson down in the deep, dark depths of the draft in the 6th round. You're going to be able to pick your GM. You got a lot of cap space. Pete Carroll's a guy that a lot of players would like to play for, and I think that's something that, especially in Vegas, is going to be really important. Pete Carroll, I think, is the Las Vegas Raiders' next head coach. And then we're going to go to the Cowboys. We had a little bit of a discussion yesterday on the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about Deion Sanders, a big name that's out there, and I think he goes there if Jerry Jones decides to give him that contract offer. But Deion Sanders, I just don't think Jerry Jones and the Cowboys are going to pull that trigger. They're looking for a head coach that's going to win them a Super Bowl. They haven't had playoff success in a very long time, and I think they want to go with a guy that's a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. They've brought in some defensive coaches back to back these last couple times, and I think we're going to go with Kellen Moore on this one, the offensive coordinator from the Philadelphia Eagles. He obviously was in that system for a long time as an offensive coordinator, as a quarterback, right? He was a backup there, then became the offensive coordinator. They kept him around for multiple coaching staffs. It was something that Jerry Jones mandated when he hired Mike McCarthy at first. I think Kellen Moore has that goodwill within the organization, and I think he gets his shot at head coaching with the Cowboys and Dak Prescott this coaching cycle. The Saints are up next here, and I think there's a couple guys. We talked about Mike McCarthy potentially going there. This is another spot that I think a Pete Carroll could land in and do pretty good. But I'm looking at a guy who's going to be a first-time head coach. Maybe not the best landing spot for him, but Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, is someone that I think could do really well over there in New Orleans. They've had a history, at least in the last couple years, of relying on those defensive coordinators. Dennis Allen was there for a little while. I think this is one where you go and get an exciting young coach like an Aaron Glenn. You say, hey, I'm going to give you a lot of leeway. That's going to be very important in enticing a young coach like this to come in. You're going to have to know and give him a long leash because the Saints don't have room to sign anybody. They don't. They're going to have to do this through the draft, and they're going to have to build it the old-fashioned way, right? It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, so you have to be patient with your young head coach. I think Aaron Glenn gets his opportunity and becomes the Saints' next head coach. Then we have the Bears. This is the one that I think is the most interesting because on paper, when you take a look at all of the available options, the Bears probably have one of the best situations. You have the former number one overall pick in Caleb Williams, who for my money, still a good quarterback that if you get the right guy in to develop him, could be very, very good. We're looking at guys like a Cliff Kingsbury. We're looking at guys like a Ben Johnson, like a Joe Brady. Maybe you go and get Mike McCarthy. Maybe you go get Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. These names have been thrown out there and go get a good offensive coordinator, but I think they go towards more the offensive route, and I think Ben Johnson is their number one pick. There's been a lot of rumors saying Ben Johnson is not going to Chicago, and would I blame him for not deciding to go to Chicago? No, I wouldn't blame him for that. But I think the Chicago Bears are going to go for him, and if he says yes, if he wants to go to Chicago, that is where he will end up. I also think outside of that, Cliff Kingsbury is probably the number two option for them to go there because, like I said, they want a young offensive mind that can work with Caleb Williams and get everything they need out of him. They saw what Cliff Kingsbury did with Jaden Daniels this offseason, and I think he can do something similar with Caleb Williams this year. That's something I think is very possible. So I think the Bears go and get a young offensive mind, either Ben Johnson or Cliff Kingsbury. At number 5, we got the Jets. They're the next one up there, and they're going to get a retread. No young offensive or defensive mind is going to put their horse behind the Jets, right? It's Aaron Rodgers' team. You're looking for a retread, and Rex Ryan has come out as the favorite. Another guy that I think is a dark horse, though, is Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings right now. The Jets need to fix that defense. That was one of the biggest downgrades that happened this season, especially after firing their last head coach in Robert Saleh, right? They lose that big defensive mind, and the defense falls off a cliff, right? It wasn't the greatest, the same unit that it was at the beginning of the year either, but it fell starkly once they lost Robert Saleh. Getting another defensive mind in that building to build around the players that they have, how much they've invested in that defense. You keep Aaron Rodgers around for another year. I think Rex Ryan is the favorite to get that job. I think he will get it, but Brian Flores is a name that I'm looking at that in case they want to go a little bit younger, give another guy a chance. I think Brian Flores is someone that could step into that Jets building and give them a pretty good job, give them exactly what they need, at least ride through the end of the Aaron Rodgers storm. And then the last one, the last opening, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there's a couple of big names out there that I think the Jags could go for. The Jags are in an interesting situation because they've committed to their quarterback, right? They've said Trevor Lawrence is our guy. And I don't think that's the wrong decision. I think Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback that could develop into something great. He signed that huge contract earlier in the last offseason. So he's just starting that deal. He's got a couple more years left. You've got a really good wide receiver one with Brian Thomas Jr. You need to develop that defense a little bit. But on offense, you've got a lot of pieces there. Travis Etienne took a big step back, but you've got a good lightning and thunder punch with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby back there, right? Those are two guys that you could rely on in the running game, and we've seen it be effective. You build up that offensive line a little bit, you build up that defense. This is a Jags team that made the playoffs 2 years ago, right? They won a playoff game 2 years ago. This is something that I could see them getting back to pretty quickly, pretty easily. So I'm going for a guy that I think could work well with Trevor Lawrence. Looking on the offensive side of the ball, I think Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is a guy that is really good to go to Jacksonville. He's my favorite to go there. He's my pick. But outside of that, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills, what he's been able to do over there, potentially winning Josh Allen his first MVP, that's something that could go there. Joe Brady getting a lot of head coach talk. I'm not sure if he's actually going to get one, but Jaguars, I think, would be a good fit for him. And lastly, Mike McCarthy. I think he's number 3 down there, but if you get Mike McCarthy in the building, get some leadership in there, again, it's a pretty young team over there in Jacksonville. He can help bring a couple guys in that can turn that team around, get them going in the right direction. That's one. But at the end of the day, Raiders, I think, get Pete Carroll. The Cowboys get Kellen Moore. The Saints get Aaron Glenn. The Bears get Ben Johnson. The Jets get Rex Ryan. And the Jaguars end off the coaching search, getting Liam Cohen. But let me know what you think. Where would you put each head coach? Who do you think is going to fill each vacancy? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the big question of the day, at least on my mind, something I've been thinking about for a while. Where does Jaden Daniels rank on the list of NFL quarterbacks right now? Because he's obviously had a great rookie season, but where does he rank? Could you put him in the top 5? We're going to talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports.